Hello, good evening, and welcome to another late night talk. My name is Stephen Aryan, and joining me today is fantasy author Sarah J. Daley. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
We're going to be talking about her path to publication as a debut author. Her first novel, Obsidian, just came out from Angry Robot Books, and she was picked up as part of the open submission window in 2020. So we're going to be talking all about that, how she got started, all of her background, and what happened next once she got picked up by Angry Robot. So we'll come on to that. But before all of that, let's go back to the beginning. I love a good origin story. Let's talk a bit about your background as a writer. What sort of things were you reading when you were a kid? What kind of books were influencing you then?
When I was young, I started reading fairy tales when I was really young. I mean, I just always enjoyed the fairy tales, always enjoyed the Greek myths, those kind of stories, the fantastical stories.
Yeah.
But when I was first started getting into writing, it was after I had read all the Black Stallion books. I read every single one of them, all that I could find. And I used to write horse stories because I always wanted a horse and I never got a horse. So I'd write myself into my own horse stories. And then I read the Dark is Rising series, Susan Cooper, and I just adored those books, and they really got me inspired into writing fantasy. And I moved on to like Dragonlance and things like that, you know, when you get a little older in high school and whatever. And I read some sci-fi, but mostly I did like at the beginning, I used to read a lot of Orson Scott Card, those kind of books back in the day. I never really got into Asimov, but I pretty much stuck with fantasy through most of that. And I would always write fantasy. That's what I always wanted to write. So I started writing short stories a bit in college, and I always was working on a novel, you know,
Right.
an unending novel that I would tell my friends about, would never let anybody read it. So I just kind of kept it to myself for years and years and years. And I started submitting after college. I got a few nice rejections here and there. But, you know, nothing ever seemed to come of it. I got a couple agent, full requests. And after a while, I just kind of, life gets in the way, and you have a family, and, you get married and whatever, divorced and all these things. And I kind of moved away from writing all the time, but I never gave it up. And basically, I stopped. I went into the culinary field, which has nothing to do with writing, but that was, I actually have a degree in landscape architecture of all things, from the University of Illinois. And I enjoyed plants and things like that. And my parents kind of encouraged me. And I had a lot of people telling me, well, you're not going to make a living writing books. That's kind of crazy. Why would you even do that? So, you got so many people telling you you're not going to make a living at it. So you move on to other things. But I still wrote in my spare time. I mean, I wrote all the time. And years passed, and I finally decided I'd gone into the culinary field, and right before the pandemic, things started slowing down anyway, just because the restaurant I'd worked at had gone under. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this one last try. I'm going to finish this book that I've been working on, which was Obsidian, which is that one. And I'm going to self-publish, I'll try that. We'll go see how that works. But I wasn't real confident in my abilities to self-publish, because you really have to hustle to do that, be successful at it, So Angry Robot, the pandemic hit, and then they had their open door submission that summer. And I had a manuscript ready for once, it was complete. I'd edited it and I was happy with it, and I threw it on in there, hoping for the best.
Was this the first novel that you actually finished, given that you've been doing short stories and other things?
No, I'd finished another book, which is actually the first book in this series. I mean, it actually happens. The events in that book, the events in that book take place after the events in Obsidian. And that was the book I had worked on for quite some time. And I wrote a couple other like rough drafts, like almost complete rough drafts. I'd say they were pretty much complete, but I'd set those aside and come back to this one. And I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to take this back and go a little earlier in the story. And then I wrote Obsidian on earlier events from this book I'd worked on for years and years and years. And it just clicked, and it was a fast paced, standalone story. And I was like, okay, this works as a book by itself, which is, a little easier to sell than the potential of a trilogy or whatever.
Yeah.
So So that was how this one came about. But I had written other books. I'd finished other things, but you always tend to, I rewrite constantly, and that's probably my fatal flaw, is to just never feel like it's finished. So I want to go back and do it over and over and over again. And this one, I was like, it's done. It's as done as it's going to be, and I just gotta send it out there.
So talk to me about creating this world. Where did the idea first come for the whole story?
Well, it's been stewing a long time. And originally, I had the idea of more of a Western type setting, because I played around with a couple short stories. I always wanted them to carry the gemstone blades, which is a big part of the book. And I just, for whatever reason, I was always fascinated with gemstones and jewels and all those kind of things, which they play a big part in a lot of fantasies. And I also was obsessed at the time. I can't remember why. It was probably because I was watching a lot of like Western movies. And I also got all into the original Japanese movies that all the spaghetti Westerns are based on, like Yojimbo and Seven Samurai and all those movies. And I love the idea of gunfighters. But, you can't have gunfighters in a fantasy book. So I turned the guns into blades. But I loved just the showdowns of, the duels between, the gunfighters. So that's how the the blades came about, the gemstone blades. And blood magic, the blood magic aspect of it, not necessarily, it's not that original of an idea. I just put kind of a twist on it, because the idea of spilling blood for power is pretty common in fantasy. It's not unusual. But I was like, all of it was always, you'd kill somebody else, you shed somebody else's blood for power, which is always kind of, it's not nice. So I had my wizards, well, why don't you shed your own blood, but you're going to bleed to death if you shed all your own blood. So the tattoos came in to help, bind the skin back together after you cut. And I had a lot of friends with a lot of tattoos, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. I've always loved tattoos. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have that in my story. And then the whole world, the setting, the Malavita, and the kind of mafioso type brotherhood in there, and all the criminal blood wizards. I had that was another book and movie set, was the Godfather. I read the novel for the first time, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved the whole part about Sicily, and so I became fascinated with Sicily, and did a little research and just learned about the history of the country and how it had many invaders. Like it just got traded back and forth between a lot of different conquerors. And and then that's why the mafia rose up as their own little police force, because basically they had all these different countries ruling over them. So the people just kind of made their own police force, essentially. I mean, they were criminals, some of them. But anyway, I like that concept, and I put that into this story. And the veils and the wastes. I've always liked the idea of the wasteland, the desert setting, and just really, really difficult places to live. And the veils were, so just sheltered, protected areas, and that was part of the world building. And I think that came from a lot of different books I'd read. The idea of, like I always liked Dune, when they had the desert, where you had to took a lot of effort to get through it, and it was always really dangerous. And I like that. So that was part of it.
Because it's kind of a dystopian world in a way, that it's completely ruined by, well, you've got the wastes. I'm trying not to spoil stuff, but there's a huge wasteland area, essentially, where there's things roaming around, and the only thing that protect people are these veils and pockets. So did you spend a bit of time thinking about, well, what caused this sort of create the waste, and what happened and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it was definitely a man-made disaster. It's not just the way the world is. I mean, this happened to this, and it's a particular country. It's not the entire world of the book. Like Malavita is a relatively small country in a larger world, with their own particular set of problems. So, but the wastes were created by wizards, basically, by magic gone wrong. People originally practicing blood magic by killing innocent people. So that gave rise to the blight of the wastes, and the demons that inhabit it all come from that. All come from man-made disaster, basically. So I guess it is dystopian.
Yeah, and the only place that's safe are these pockets within the veils that are controlled by the Brotherhood, and they're this mafia type group of wizards, blood wizards, though.
Right. They basically they can control the elements, so they can control everything, and the regular people are just kind of at their mercy. So,
but the book takes place at an interesting kind of conjunction, because you've got this larger force that's now kind of coming in and trying to impose their will upon them. At the same time, they have to make bargains with this group of blood wizards. So can you talk about some of the kind of the social dynamics? They're a bit different.
Yeah, so the newest, conqueror, the newest empire, to call it their, they own it now. They didn't even conquer it. They just kind of like, pass it along from one person to another, or one kingdom to another, with whoever's on top gets to claim Malavita for their own. Because even though it's a wasteland and it's really difficult to live there, they have this wealth of gems that a lot of other countries want to get their hands on. But only the blood wizards can access them. Only the Brotherhood has access to the hidden mines. They have complete control over this one resource. So even this powerful empire has to kind of crawl to them to get the stones, and they don't want to do that anymore. So it works out that Shade, who's, she's decided to, buck convention and dress like a wizard openly and wield magic, which women aren't really allowed to do, although they all have magic, but they kind of have to keep it hidden. But she's decided, she grew up in a different kind of situation, and she's decided her people need shelter, and she's going to provide it for them, and she doesn't care, what her enemies are going to do. She knows they're going to try and stop her, which is why she's trying to get the empire on her side, just so she has some recourse, because otherwise, you're at the mercy of the Brotherhood and all their blood wizard soldiers, basically.
And so not only is she different because she's a woman who's openly wielding her magic, but all of them carry these kind of dual blades, but she uses very basic blades by comparison.
Right. Yeah.
So talk about some of that, the differences with that.
Right. Her blades are obsidian.
Funny, yeah.
And, there you go. Go figure.
Yeah.
And I always wanted her to be different, her to be, special. And obsidian, I explained in the book that it's basically, it's a really common stone. I mean, anybody can get a hold of it, but it's special because it's made from volcanic activity, and it's a young stone, relatively speaking, compared to like rubies and sapphires and things like that. And there's a lot of risk to using obsidian, because it gives the wielder access to a wild power, which is kind of an unpredictable kind of magic, and to wield it is very, very dangerous, because you don't know if it's going to turn on you, or if it's going to give you all the power in the world, or basically destroy everything around you. So she's willing to take that risk, because she's just like, she's incredibly strong anyway. And to get the really good blades, you have to go through the Brotherhood, like the ruby and the sapphire and those kind of blades anyway. So she's going her own way and everything, and obsidian is one big difference between her and the rest of the blood wizards. So
there's the wild magic of that. Even they have kind of just said that it's just too dangerous. They don't even want to touch it, and yet she's willing to, because of the situation.
Exactly. She's definitely willing to try, or willing to touch it. So, which works out well in some instances, and it's not so well in other instances.
Yeah, but she's kind of stuck. She's got this power and she wants to wield it, but at the same time she's caught between the blood wizards who don't want her to do anything, and then you've got the empire that kind of need access, and she's potentially going to give them something that nobody else can.
Right. So they're willing to support her for that, as long as she can deliver.
Yeah, she's kind of the linchpin for a lot of different things in the book.
Right.
So when did you finish writing, like, your first draft of Obsidian? When we like, okay, I think it's nearly ready, or it is ready?
Well, it's funny, because the first half of the book I wrote during NaNoWriMo month, the National NaNoWriMo month. I wrote just because I was like, I'm just going to write this. I need to just write it. I can't spend months writing it. I'm going to get this out. So I wrote the first half in like a month, and then kind of didn't do much with it. And then the second NaNoWriMo a year later, I was like, I better finish this.
Yeah.
So I wrote, and it was just Google. So I wrote the next 100 or 50,000 words, you know, and then I had a whole book. So I was like, okay, now I'll finish it. But it went through a few drafts in the meantime. You know, I worked on it off and on, but I can't remember what your original question was.
No, just when did you first kind of finish it, the draft?
Oh, okay. It actually was probably finished right at the start of the pandemic. I think when I was happy with the latest draft of it, I was like, this is done. I'm like, it makes sense. Everything, you know, and there's no like big time change that I kind of, you know how you shift in the middle of your story and you're like, oh, I'm going to add this whole new plot line. I mean, all that stuff made sense finally at the end. So I had a whole draft ready to go, and it took I'd say about 6 months to get through this final version that I was happy with.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Angry Robot opened their doors, and I basically spent 2 weeks, you know, running through it and capitalizing things and checking commas and stuff like that. You know, I didn't do any major revisions. And the harder part was writing the synopsis, because, you know, you just submit with the first 3 chapters, your query and a synopsis. And the synopsis is tough.
It's the hardest. People don't believe me, but it is harder than writing the book in some ways.
It really is. I mean, it was only a page, but it had to make sense. It had to be, you know, somewhat interesting. But for once I was able to, you know, you just peel away all the subplots, focus on the main goal, the main story goal. And this book has a pretty straightforward goal, you know. The characters' motivations are pretty clear from the start. I thought she had a pretty good clear goals for all of them, really.
So did anybody else read the book? Did anybody else edit the book?
I had my husband read it. Cool. And he was reading it while I was editing it, and he'd say a couple things. And this is literally this past summer, or I'm sorry, 2 years ago, my God.
Yeah.
We were all locked down. So I was like, well, why don't you read this? Because you keep telling me I should self-publish, well, might try reading it. He's like, okay. So he started reading it, and I enlisted another friend who's a huge reader. And I was like, you know what, can you read this for me? I just need to have somebody read it. And while she was reading it, I was racing to finish my edits as she read it. So that helped me complete the thing too, just having someone look at it. And that was basically the only 2 people who'd ever looked at it. And then before I sent it into Angry Robot, which apparently that's strange, because I told some of my writing friends that, and they were like, what? Like, didn't you have betas? Didn't you have critique partners or anything? And I'm like, no, I just did it here. I had 1 person read or 2 people read it, and then I sent it in.
Yeah. Some people find that really weird, but every time I talk to an author, the origin story is never completely the same. There's always something that's slightly different, that's slightly unique. Yeah. I found the origin stories of authors really fascinating, like how people sold their first book, especially before I got anything published. I was like, how did they do it? Some people are like, I sent out 70 queries, I sent out 100 queries. And I'm like, I just can't even imagine. I don't know. I mean, I think overall I sent out like maybe 10 queries over the years to agents, which is not enough, obviously. So I did a lot of rejections, a lot of books, a lot of years getting rejected. And this is, as we were saying before we started recording, this is in the day when it was the internet was in its infancy, and it was self-addressed envelopes only. Right. So you send out your first, I don't know, 3 chapters, 5 chapters in an envelope with another envelope in that you paid the postage on. So they wouldn't even do that. It was all paper. Of course, there's no email, and you send it out, and you have to wait between 3 and 6 months to get a reply. And sometimes you just got your material sent back with no comment. Sometimes you never got it back, and sometimes you just got like a postcard with your name written in, and the rest of it's just printed. That was it. I'd
usually get at least my sad little envelope back with my address scrawled on it. I was like, But and it's so funny, because when the last time I started querying again years ago, even then they were still, this is like maybe 15 years ago, I think. And even then they were like, don't send emails, don't send emails. I'm like, okay, you know, because they like get flooded. But now it's like, you know, don't send paper, for the love of God, don't send paper.
Save the
to
trees, don't send the
anybody.
paper.
Right. Email queries only, which I'm like, they have to get inundated now with email
Oh yeah.
queries. It's got to be crazy.
It's ridiculous. I mean, so I looked at some of the stats. So the year that you sent in your submission, I think they had close to like 1,000 submissions, and they took on 2 authors. It was yourself and Ron Walters for Deep Dive.
Yeah. Right.
And last year's submission window, they had like 990, and there again they took on 2 authors. So for those who are listening, for those who are paying attention to the stats, you got like a 1 in 500 chance, which you think, oh, that's crazy, and then think those are pretty good odds.
Those are good odds, actually.
The year I got taken on, my agent had thousands of submissions, and she took on less than 6 clients.
I was gonna say, getting an agent is a huge first step.
So I mean, 1 in 500 is good. 1 in a couple of thousand is probably average for an agent.
Right. Yeah.
So that's, you know, Angry Robot, you got a pretty good chance. You got a pretty good
right.
chance.
I was gonna say, we have a friend of ours who we're telling him to submit in the open window because he doesn't have an agent yet. It's like, do it. It's like, you got a book ready to go, put it in there.
Yeah. I've got a few people I know. I'm helping them with their kind of submissions and queries, letters and synopsis and all of that. And they're like, oh God, I like, just do it. Just go for it and try it and see what happens. You've got nothing to lose, you know, just go for it.
Right. I spent a lot of time just like, oh, it's not ready. It's not ready. It's not ready. It's not, I want to work a little bit more. I want to do a little bit more. But you can keep doing that. I mean, you know, you can rewrite everything you've ever written 1,000 times. You know, as authors, I think most authors are like, I wish I could redo this part, you know, even on their finished books. I'm done. With Obsidian, it's like, I can't change anything now. This is a new feeling when it's published. It's like, that's it.
That's it. Game over now. Yeah. It's with all the things that you don't like about it later on. Right. That's it. It's too late now. Sorry. You can't go back and redo it, you know. So you send it off in 2020. And how long did you have to wait for kind of a response for the full manuscript?
I sent it in like 2 minutes before midnight on the last day of the submissions. and I was like, a month went by. And I was like, you know, I sent it off. I'm like, forget it. It's done. Yeah. I'm not going to get picked up. It doesn't matter. It's over. I sent it in. And then a month went by. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. It's there. I'll never hear back from them. If you don't hear back, they say you're not going to get picked. So I'm like, fine. So then another month goes by, and I believe it was August or end of August. And I got an email from Gemma, and she's like, oh, I'm writing to give you good news. And from there it was, they sent it to the acquisitions team, she said. And I was like, oh no, a team has to look at it. Well, someone somewhere is not going to like it and it'll get rejected. But then a week later, she got back to me and said they were ready to make an offer, but I had to cut quite a bit. Oh, it was pretty long.
So how long was the book originally?
The book was like 150,000 words.
Okay.
And she wanted me to cut. She told me 200 pages, which I wasn't quite sure what that meant, because I think it was over 600 pages, like on the Word document.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so I figured that was about 50,000 words.
Yeah.
And so I got it down. I think I cut out like 40,000 words, and I was like, okay, that's pretty close. And then I added back in during editing process. I added back in another 10,000 words or so. So, but it ended up being like what? I think it's 110,000 words or something. 400 pages. It's a decent length. It's a good length. It's not too huge, not too small.
That's kind of their kind of sweet spot. They said on the submission window, they're looking for 80 to 120, I think it is, for this year. Yeah. That's the kind of sweet spot they sort of like on their window. Well, so
you know, I see all these Twitter threads on word count, and people just like constantly talking about word count. But if it's a great book, it doesn't matter if it's 190,000 words, it should be great. I'm like, well, you can play around with word count a little bit. Like 150,000 words was definitely fatter than, you know, most manuscripts suggestions. You know, it's a little longer than your average manuscript. So, but it's still, you know, send it out. There's always editing. I mean, unless it's just bloated and it's not a good story to begin with. If there's a book in there and a book that's marketable, they'll find it, they'll see it.
Yeah. Some books are much longer, like 200, 250.
Right.
Create like Justin Cole's novel. There's like a door stopper. It's like 700 pages. I'm like, oh my God, how many words is that? It's got to be 300,000 plus. And Mike Shackle, I talked to, his third one was, I think it's like 650 pages. He's editing at the moment. I'm like, oh, that's
it's
huge.
Well, I think the In the Name of the Wind, that was his debut novel, and
yeah,
that thing was gigantic,
But I think for a debut author, I think like they prefer shorter books for a debut. I think once you kind of progress, maybe they give you a little bit more leeway. But
yeah. I was gonna say, I've noticed that with people, their books get fatter and fatter and fatter as they go on.
Well, yeah, especially like the Harry Potter ones. They started off like really thin, and then by the end of these huge beasts,
giant encyclopedias.
They were crazy.
I think at that point they're just like, do whatever, it'll sell.
License to print money, go.
It's fine.
So how did you find the editing process? Because this is the first time someone, at a publisher sat down and said, okay, we want to change this, we want to work on that after you've done the cuts. How was that for you?
Well, the first edit was it was just, you got to cut this many words, and I was like, okay, how do I do that? And they gave me like one tiny suggestion of how I might do that, and then I was like, okay, I'll handle it. So I did that first edit, and I was like, cutting is not too bad. You got to rearrange things, but it wasn't too bad. And then when I got my first editorial letter, my editor was Simon Spanton.
Yes.
And I was really nervous to get this letter. I didn't look at it for like a couple days. I got it in my computer. I'm like, well, I got my editorial letter. My husband's like, oh, what did it say? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet. So I finally looked at it. And, it was like first paragraph's like, oh, it was nice being able to edit your book. And this part was great. And that part was great. And now here's all these other things. here's where this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. What does this mean? What does that mean? You got to explain this. And I was like, oh crap. So I got that editing notes, and but he gave me really good notes. I thought he gave me ways to go, and what was not working. So that really was helpful. And once I started in on the book, like editing, there was like a couple parts where I was like, if I change this one thing, that changes the last half of the book. Like that changes so many other aspects.
Right.
And I was like, oh crap. But I managed to figure out how to work in that change. And it ended up being stronger for it, definitely. And made more sense. And I also came up with like other plot lines that hopefully I'll carry into another book, knock on wood, after this one. So it was very helpful. It was neat. And I got those edits, and I finished them, and I turned them in, and he was like, oh, this is great. Everything you did everything I asked you to. And then I got my copy edits after that. And the copy edits, I gave myself like, oh, I'll do, a chapter a day and work through it, and however long it's going to take. And it took me like a day to get through the copy edits. It was really fast.
Wow.
So I thought that went really quick. And then that was it, pretty much, final proofread. And the editing process was pretty seamless, I felt. Not too bad. That's
pretty good. That first edit, sometimes for me, I kind of describe it as like you're a skier going down the hill, the slalom, and you're trying to hit all of the kind of things that they've pointed out. You've got to try and sometimes you don't go straight through, you just kind of like clip them, and you're like, and then they're like, oh, that's okay, you've kind of got near what we're asking for. That's fine. That's how I kind of describe it. Sometimes I'm like, but you've got to weave it all together again and get to the end.
Right.
That can be like complicated. And
it was tough there at the first. I had to really think about it, give myself some time to just work it through in my head before I started writing it. I mean, there was some part I'm like, man, if I make this change, I was really reluctant. I was thinking about not making a change they wanted, because I was like, boy, that really changes a lot. But I was like, you know what? It actually is better if I made this change. So just gotta trust that they know what they're doing, basically. But you can always say, no, I'm not going to do it, and just stick to your guns. But I was okay with getting editorial advice, because there's the one thing I was really missing out on, and it never occurred to me to go find beta readers or people to give me advice.
Right.
Because I was like, it'd really be nice to have somebody professional look at my book and tell me what's good about it and what's bad about it. What do I need to change? So it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, because you can ask your friends and family and they can give you their feedback, but it's not the same. It's just how far you can take it yourself, and then if you can go to critiques, they can be good, like critique circles or writing forums, they can be useful sometimes. But
yeah,
it's worse when you don't know, when you send out the book and you get rejected and you just get the standard no thanks, and you don't know what was wrong with it and how to fix it, and how can you improve.
Yeah.
So it's really tough without that kind of feedback, I think.
Yeah, that's not helpful. No, we don't want it.
Yeah, like, well, why? No, well, I haven't got time to tell you. Oh, okay. So,
like, am I a terrible writer? Is it not a good story for you? Is it, whatever.
Yeah,
form rejections are the worst.
Yeah, this is it. So, do you have a literary agent? Did they suggest you get one? Did you write one?
I do not have one yet, but that is my next goal. I have a couple other books in the hopper that I want to get representation for. And I have some idea of who I want to go to. Like a lot of my friends, a lot of the AR authors I know are at a particular agency. And my friend Patty, I don't know if you know Patty Jackson, she basically got me in touch with her agent. So I will I'll query her first and then go from there. We'll see. I think I have at least a leg up with looking for an agent this time around,
Absolutely. Yeah. The fact that you've got a book and it's out and it's been
right.
So was it a one book deal or more that you got?
A one book deal with the option for a second book in that world. So, but I mean, I sold it as a standalone, so I wasn't trying to sell a trilogy or anything.
Yeah.
It really is for my plans, if everything goes well, what I would like to see is Obsidian remain a standalone novel, almost the idea that it's a kind of a prequel type thing.
Yeah.
And then the next book I'm writing is the launch of at least a duology or a trilogy.
Trilogy.
Trilogy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a series.
Yeah.
So, because and even the next book in the series, is basically a first book. So it's not like, I don't even know if you'd have to read Obsidian for the next book to make sense. Because technically I wrote that book first. This book that I'm working on now, I wrote before Obsidian, and it has all the characters in it, and Shade and all those people, and a bunch of other characters that aren't in Obsidian. So, so if you read it, it'd be like, oh, I don't think you get lost. I don't think you'd be too terribly lost if you started with that one.
Yeah. So I guess once that's done, you can then start talking to agents and say, I got the book, it's done. I've got a book out with Angry Robot. It's
yeah.
See where I go next.
Hopefully on to publish other books.
So are you planning the series? Have you kind of plotted out where you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a series for these characters and this storyline. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's just started. The story's just started.
Yeah.
Like basically this set the stage, and then the real story is coming after this in the next books. But I have another novel that's in a completely different setting and characters, and I'm really happy with that one too. So I have a couple works in progress, I guess you could say, that I'm looking forward to putting out there at some point, hopefully. Just got to finish them.
Yeah, finding the time, that's the thing, in the brain space, the head space to do it.
But I'd like to, I'd like to get an agent at this point, just because it seems like agents, I wasn't sure, here's another thing about how to not do this. I mean, I wasn't sure what good an agent would do me after I got published.
Yep.
But they really are there to advance your career more than anything else. An agent, a publisher will publish your books as long as you have a book to give them and they want it. But an agent, is kind of more like your champion, putting your stuff out there. Yeah.
There's all of the contract stuff they deal with. There's the international rights and selling it to other territories, and the translation rights and all that sort of stuff. Right. So like my first trilogy was published in French, German, and Russian.
Nice.
And then I got, invited to like a French festival over there for a thing, and that was really cool. And it's just brilliant. Gone meeting French fans and
that's really cool.
All that kind of stuff.
Knock on wood. I'm hoping translation would be pretty cool. See your book in another language.
Yeah, and I know a few self-published authors who've now got agents to help them with that kind of stuff. So,
really?
Yeah. So like Bengali and Robert J. Hayes, they both got, John Jarrold is now their agent, and on his website, wow. It's common news now. It's public news where he said, I've just sold Chasing Graves rights for Bengali's book to Russia, and Rob Hayes has been one sold to like Brazil and stuff, and they're kind of hybrids now because they've got. So it's the rules. So because when I started submitting, self-publishing wasn't really a thing. It was vanity press. That was the only kind of thing. You pay someone and they just print your book, and that was it. Now self-publishing is.
You had like 4 copies of your book.
Yeah.
It was expensive. It was like thousands of dollars to get that.
It's a lot of money. Yeah. But now it's amazing.
It's a business. Self-publishing, you can be very successful with it. I'm like, I don't know if I could do that on my own. I like having Angry Robot to do the part marketing and, get it into the bookstores and wherever. I mean, it's pretty neat because there's, it's in all these bookstores, and it's so funny because my family and my sisters are like, it's like a real book. It's like all over. You can find it.
like a real book.
Yeah, it's like a real book. It's like at Barnes and Noble and bookstores. I'm like, yeah, that's how it works.
It's a real book.
It's a real book.
It's a real book.
Yeah. You guys, hey. I know I used to scribble in spiral notebooks when I was a kid, but this is an actual real book.
This is it. You're there now. You've done it. So onwards to new things, new books, new series, and see what happens next.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting times.
Yeah.
The sales go. I have no idea how I know or how my sales are going. I suppose I'll know when I get a royalty statement at some point.
Yeah. Like every 6 months, they'll let you know what's going on and sales wise and stuff. But yeah, exciting stuff. Excellent. So I'll direct links people down below. They can find out more about you and the books and everything. Nice. And thanks for coming on and telling everyone your story about how you got here, how you got published. And for those who are too late for the current Angry Robot window, they keep bringing it out every kind of year or two.
Yeah.
So check it out, work on that book, get it ready. There's always literary agents, of course.
The next window is like in a week, I think. For Angry Robot.
Yeah, closes like 21st to 28th of February 2022, depending on when you're watching this. That's when it was. But,
that's right. I forget this won't be.
Live. It's not live. But there'll be another one, and if not, there's always literary agents as well, so you can try kind of traditional route too. But yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Sarah, and we'll say goodnight to everyone.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.